police K9 sergeant found a German Shepherd puppy scratching at his back door in the snow. She came every afternoon, not for him, but for his old K9 partner. He fed her, sheltered her, and slowly taught her that an open door was not a trap. But the more she trusted his home, the harder the truth became to face. Because one phone call proved she had another name, another family, and a road back home. So what do you do when love tells you to hold on, but kindness tells you to let go? Tell us where you're watching from, and please like, share, and subscribe. Winter came to Harbor Glen with a kind of brightness that made silence feel almost alive. The town sat along the Wisconsin shore like it had been placed there carefully, roof by roof, dock by dock. Each small house turned toward the frozen lake as if waiting for the ice to speak. Snow rested on the marina railings in clean white lines. The water beyond the harbor had hardened into pale glass, catching the afternoon sun and throwing it back against windows, windshields, and the quiet faces of houses where smoke lifted gently from chimneys. Sergeant Reed Callahan had learned to trust winter more than most people did. Not because it was kind. Winter was not kind in Harbor Glen. It froze locks, buried roads, hid black ice under innocent powder, and convinced careless people that 5 more minutes outside could do no harm. But winter was honest. It showed consequences quickly. A door left open meant cold. A weak branch snapped. A bad decision on the lake announced itself in the sharp crack beneath a boot. People were harder. Reed stood in the narrow strip of yard behind his house with a screwdriver in one gloved hand and the broken latch of his shed door in the other. The shed leaned slightly to the right, an old wooden structure with peeling gray paint and a roof that held snow longer than it should have. Every time the wind came off the lake, the latch rattled like a nervous witness. "Stay," Reed said without turning. Bishop was already staying. The German Shepherd sat near the back steps, large and steady against the white yard, his black and tan coat sharp in the snow-bright afternoon. At 8 years old, Bishop still carried himself like a dog who expected the world to follow procedure. His body had thickened a little since retirement, but the old strength remained in his chest, shoulders, and patient eyes. A small scar nicked the edge of his left ear, pale against the dark fur, the only visible reminder of years spent beside Reed in patrol cars, alleys, parking lots, domestic calls, school demonstrations, and too many winter nights with blue lights spinning over ice. Bishop had been a working K9 once. Now, legally and finally, he was Reed's dog. That sounded simple when written on paper. It had not felt simple at first. For years, Reed had known where Bishop belonged, left side, 2 steps back, waiting on command, in a cruiser, on a scene, behind a closed door until called forward. Retirement had taken away the clean lines. Bishop no longer had to search a building, hold a perimeter, or stand alert, while Reed spoke to a frightened person through a screen door at 2 in the morning. But every afternoon, close to 4, Bishop still came to the back door. He would stand there, ears lifted, eyes fixed through the mesh toward the yard, waiting with the quiet seriousness of an animal who believed a shift was about to begin. Reed had tried to ignore it at first. Then he had tried to joke about it. Now he simply noticed. Not all habits knew when duty had ended. The shed latch refused to line up. Reed exhaled through his nose, removed one glove with his teeth, and pressed the metal plate flatter against the doorframe. His hands were broad and steady, the hands of a man who had spent 20 years being expected not to shake. He was 43, tall, square-shouldered, and still athletic enough that people assumed he liked being called imposing. He did not. His face had hard angles, a strong jaw darkened by very short stubble, and blue-gray eyes that made strangers answer questions more carefully than they intended. His dark brown hair was cut short in the clean, practical style the department preferred. In uniform, Reed looked like order. At home, in a dark thermal shirt, under a navy flannel, jeans tucked into winter boots, and an old black wristwatch tight against his left wrist, he looked more like a man trying to repair small things before the larger ones found him. The larger things always found him eventually. A year earlier, in weather much colder than this, Reed had answered a crisis call at a duplex near the highway. A young man had been locked in a garage, terrified, shouting at shadows no one else could see. Reed had followed training. He had secured the exits. He had kept distance. He had used the voice he used when fear needed a wall to lean against. Other officers had moved where they were supposed to move. No one rushed. No one struck him. No one broke policy. Still, when the garage door opened, the young man saw uniforms on every side and tried to run through the only gap left. He fell hard on the ice. The injury was minor. The report was clean. The review board found no misconduct. The chief told Reed he had done what anyone would have done. That was the sentence that stayed with him. What anyone would have done. It was not the same as saying it had helped. A faint sound came from the back of the house. Scratch. Reed paused with the screwdriver still pressed to the latch. Bishop's head lifted. Scratch. Scratch. The sound was too light for a branch, too deliberate for wind. It came from the kitchen door, the one with the old screen that Reed kept meaning to replace. Bishop stood, not fast, not startled, but with a change so complete that Reed felt it before he fully understood it. The dog's ears came forward. His body did not tense into warning. He did not bark. That made Reed more alert than barking would have. "Easy," Reed said. Bishop glanced back once, then moved toward the steps. Reed set the latch on the shed shelf and crossed the yard slowly. Snow creaked under his boots. The afternoon had gone still, the kind of stillness that made even distant sounds seem close. A gull somewhere over the marina, a truck rolling over packed snow 2 streets away, the soft ticking of frozen branches shifting in the light wind. At the back door, Bishop stopped. On the other side of the screen stood a German shepherd puppy. She was small enough that her head barely reached the lower wooden bar. Snow clung to the guard hairs along her back and melted into dark patches at her shoulders. Her legs looked too large for her body, thick-pawed and awkward, as if she had borrowed them from the dog she intended to become. One ear stood upright. The other folded sideways in a way that made her look both ridiculous and deeply serious. In her mouth was a red wool glove. It was old, stretched at the cuff, and covered in wet bits of leaf and snow. A torn thread dangled from one finger. The puppy looked at Reed once, then she saw Bishop. Her tail began to move with such force that her entire hind end swung with it. She lowered the glove gently onto the porch boards, as though presenting evidence, and stared through the mesh at the retired K9. Reed did not reach for the handle right away. Every instinct from years of patrol work lined up inside him with clean, familiar instructions. Control the scene, secure the animal, check for a collar, prevent escape, notify animal control, limit unknown contact. Bishop took one step closer to the screen and stopped. The puppy dropped her chest toward the porch, rear end lifted, tail whipping. She wanted to play so badly that she nearly fell over before anyone had agreed to anything. Reed looked down at Bishop. "You know her?" Bishop did not look away from the puppy. That was answer enough, and not an answer at all. Reed opened the inside door first. The puppy backed up half a step at the sound of the latch, but she did not run. Her eyes moved to the gap, then to Reed's hands, then back to Bishop. Reed kept his shoulders loose and his voice low. "All right," he said, "no sudden decisions." He opened the screen door halfway and held it there with his boot. Bishop stepped onto the porch. The puppy launched herself toward him. She stopped too late and bumped her nose into his shoulder. Bishop turned his head away with magnificent patience. The puppy bounced backward, sneezed, then rushed in again from a different angle, paws slipping on the snowy boards. Bishop moved down the steps into the yard, not inviting exactly, not refusing either. He kept his body loose, his pace slow, his distance measured. The puppy followed him like she had been waiting her whole short life for a large, serious dog to misunderstand her enthusiasm. Reed stood in the doorway and watched. There were things a person could command. Sit, stay, heel, leave it. There were also things that could only be allowed to unfold at their own speed. Reed had learned the first category in uniform. He was less certain about the second. Bishop circled the maple tree in the middle of the yard, the old tree whose last brown leaves still clung stubbornly to a few low branches. The puppy bounded after him, slipped, recovered, and pounced at his shadow. When Bishop paused to sniff near the fence, she tried to crawl under his chest. Bishop gave a low, brief sound, not a threat, just a boundary. The puppy froze, sat down hard in the snow, and blinked up at him. Bishop held her gaze. Then he turned and continued walking. This time, she followed without touching him. Reed felt something ease in his chest that he had not realized had tightened. He went inside, found a shallow bowl, and filled it with water. From the container under the counter, he took a small handful of Bishop's food, then thought better of it and cut the portion in half. Puppy stomachs were not police reports. They did not improve from being overloaded. When he stepped back onto the porch, the puppy came running, then stopped several feet away. Her eyes flicked to the bowl, to Reed's boots, to the open door behind him. She wanted the food. She wanted the option to leave more. Reed set the bowl near the porch post and moved back. The puppy waited until he was inside the doorway before she approached. She drank first, quick small laps, then ate with a speed that made the bowl scrape across the boards. Bishop watched from the yard, ears forward, but did not interfere. "Don't judge her," Reed murmured. "You once ate a whole sandwich through the evidence bag." Bishop ignored this attack on his record. When the food was gone, the puppy licked the boards where crumbs had fallen. Then she lifted her head and looked into the kitchen. Warm air drifted out through the open doorway. It carried the smell of coffee, old wood, leather boots drying near the mat, and the faint, clean scent of the blanket Reed washed every Friday because Bishop pretended not to care, and then slept better when it was clean. Bishop climbed the steps and walked inside. The puppy followed him, only to the threshold. Her front paw touched the edge of the indoor mat. Reed remained still, one hand resting lightly on the doorframe. Bishop turned in the kitchen and looked back, calm as a sentry. For one small second, the puppy leaned forward. The wind moved through the porch. The screen door shifted against Reed's boot with a soft wooden tap. The puppy sprang backward as if the sound had struck the floor beneath her. She scrambled down the steps, nearly tripped over the red glove, and ran halfway across the yard. Snow puffed around her paws. She stopped beneath the maple tree and turned. She did not flee. She stood there under the bare branches, chest rising and falling, eyes fixed on the open doorway. Reed slowly let out the breath he had been holding. "Okay," he said, though he was not sure whether he meant it for the puppy, Bishop, or himself. "Okay, door stays open." He left it open for another full minute. The puppy did not come closer. Eventually, Reed picked up the empty bowl, rinsed it, and placed it back outside with water. He did not call to her. He did not kneel and pat his thigh. He did not make promises in a voice soft enough to be a trap. Bishop stood beside him in the kitchen. The puppy lowered her nose to the red glove, picked it up, and carried it to the base of the maple. There she dropped it, stepped over it twice, and sat down facing the house. That was when Reed noticed the leaves stuck to the wool. Not fresh leaves. Old maple leaves, brown and curled, caught in the damp fibers as if the glove had been dragged through the narrow strip under the tree. The puppy herself had circled that maple like a tiny moon orbiting a planet that made sense to her. "Maple," Reed said quietly. Bishop's ear twitched. The puppy tilted her head. It was not a decision, not a claim, just a temporary word for a creature who had arrived without one. "Maple," Reed repeated, softer. The puppy's tail moved once. The sun dropped behind the houses before the cold deepened. Reed finished the shed latch badly, which was to say it closed, but only if threatened. He shoveled the back steps, checked the fence gate, and placed an old towel beneath the wooden chair on the covered part of the porch. Maple watched every movement from the yard. Sometimes she came close enough to sniff the towel. Sometimes she retreated to the tree. At 5:30, Reed called Bishop for dinner. Bishop came inside. Maple followed to the steps, then stopped again. Reed gave Bishop his food in the kitchen and set a smaller portion outside, farther from the door. Maple waited until the screen settled completely before she ate, fast but not as frantically as before. Afterward, she curled beneath the porch chair, nose tucked near the red glove, one ear up and one ear folded, snow melting slowly from her coat. Reed turned on the porch light. The yellow glow made the snowflakes visible, each one crossing the darkness in silence. By 9, the town had gone quiet. Somewhere near the marina, a loose halyard tapped against a mast. Reed stood in the kitchen with his hand on the light switch, looking through the screen. Maple was still there beneath the chair, awake, watching the house as if trying to understand what kind of place did not close around her. Behind Reed, Bishop left his old bed. The large German shepherd crossed the kitchen, lowered himself beside the back door, and rested his head on his paws. His body lined up with the screen, close enough that his breath faintly clouded the lower mesh. Outside, Maple shifted. She crawled from beneath the chair and settled on the porch boards directly opposite him. The red glove lay between her front paws. Only the thin screen separated the two dogs. Reed stood in the dim kitchen for a long time. He knew what the morning would require: a call, a report, a photograph sent to the right people. Procedure mattered. Procedure protected more than pride when it was done honestly. But tonight, in the first soft snowfall of the season, there was only the old K9 who would not return to his bed and the puppy who would not cross the door. Reed turned off the kitchen light. The house darkened. Bishop stayed inside. Maple stayed outside. And between them, the screen door held the shape of a promise. No one had spoken yet. By morning, the porch was empty. Reed found the red glove first. It lay beneath the wooden chair where Maple had slept, damp at the fingertips, one side flattened into the towel he had left there. The towel itself held the shallow curve of a small body. Snow had blown across the boards overnight and softened the edges of the paw prints leading down the steps. Bishop stood beside Reed in the open doorway, ears forward, nose working the cold air. "She left before breakfast," Reed said. Bishop did not look impressed by the observation. The old K9 stepped onto the porch, lowered his head to the glove, and sniffed it with slow care. Then he moved down the steps and followed the paw prints to the maple tree, around the trunk toward the back fence, and finally to the narrow gap where the fence met the line of winter-bare shrubs. The gap was too small for Bishop. It was not too small for a puppy with more than judgment. Reed crouched and studied the disturbed snow. No blood, no drag marks, no sign of panic, only small paw prints leaving the yard. That should have reassured him. It did not. By 3:50 that afternoon, Bishop had already carried his black rubber ball to the back door. He placed it on the mat, lay down beside it, and watched the screen as though a guest had been scheduled and punctuality mattered. Reed stood at the kitchen counter, pretending to sort mail. "She may not come back," he said. Bishop blinked once. At 4:06, 3 tiny scratches sounded against the screen. Bishop rose before Reed moved. Maple stood outside with snow dusted along her nose, and one brown leaf caught against her uneven ear. The red glove was gone. In its place, she carried a short stick, which she dropped immediately when she saw Bishop, as though sticks had never interested her in the first place. Her tail started again with that full-body wag, all joy and no balance. Bishop stepped outside with the measured resignation of an older professional agreeing to supervise a poorly planned festival. The routine formed faster than Reed expected. Maple came Wednesday, then Thursday, then Friday, each time just after 4, each time scratching softly instead of barking. She waited for Bishop, not for Reed. Once the screen opened, she flew into the yard and made circles around the maple tree until the snow looked stirred with paw marks. Bishop corrected her when she tried to grab his tail. He blocked her from his food bowl with one still shoulder and a low sound from his chest. When she tried to steal the ball before he dropped it, he simply lifted his head higher and let her bounce uselessly beneath his chin, but the distance changed. On Friday, Bishop slowed halfway around the tree so Maple could catch up. On Saturday, he dropped the ball near her front paws and waited while she wrestled it into her mouth. The ball was too large and she could only carry it by pinching one edge with her teeth. She made it 6 heroic steps before tripping over her own paws and landing nose first in the snow. Reed laughed despite himself. Bishop retrieved the ball and placed it 2 feet away from her, not close enough to be sentimental, not far enough to be cruel. That was when Reed stopped pretending this was only cute. A puppy could visit once and be luck. 3 days became a pattern. 4 became responsibility. On the 5th afternoon, after Maple ate from the shallow porch bowl with the same urgent scraping speed, Reed took a photograph with his phone. He made sure to capture her face, the uneven ears, the slim body, and enough of the porch to show scale. Then he waited until Maple had returned to the yard with Bishop before calling County Animal Control. Marta Quinley answered on the 4th ring with wind in the background and no patience to decorate her voice. Animal Control. Quinley. It's Sergeant Callahan in Harbor Glen. A pause. If this is about the raccoon in the church basement, I already told Father Dunn I am not crawling under another choir riser. It's a puppy. That's better. Unless the puppy is also in a church basement. Reed looked through the screen. Maple had leapt toward Bishop's ball, missed, and was now digging in the snow as if the ball had offended her. German Shepherd female. Young. No visible collar. She's been coming to my back door for 5 days. 5 days? Marta's tone changed. Not accusing, but sharper. You just now called? I wanted to see if she belonged to someone nearby. I'm calling now. Good answer. Not perfect. Paper rustled on her end. Any aggression? No. Signs of illness? Discharge? Coughing? Severe lethargy? No. Thin. Hungry. Some scratching. Shelter's full, Marta said, and the words came out with tired honesty rather than excuse. We pulled 11 animals out of a foreclosed property after the storm. I've got 3 fosters already doubled up, and the county kennels are 1 plumbing issue away from becoming an ice rink. Do you have secure fencing? Yes. Can you keep her separated from public spaces until she's scanned and checked? Yes. Call Marin's clinic. Get a scan. Basic exam. Send me the photo, date first seen, and your address. I'll mark it as emergency foster pending owner search. Reed looked down at Bishop's old food bowl beside the sink, then at the smaller bowl drying upside down on a towel. Temporary foster, Marta added, as though she could hear the silence. Not adoption by weather. I know. People say that right before they buy a tiny collar. Reed ended the call with instructions, not permission to hope. The next morning, he took Maple to Dr. Paula Marin before the clinic opened for regular appointments. Getting her into the car required patience, the old folding crate from the garage, and Bishop's towel placed inside. Reed did not drag her. He let her circle the crate in the open garage while Bishop waited several feet away, calm enough to make the space feel less like a trap. Maple stepped in only after Reed removed the crate door completely. He rode beside her in the back of the department SUV he used for community calls, one hand resting near the crate, but not touching it. Maple panted for the first 5 minutes, then pressed her nose into Bishop's towel and went still. Dr. Paula Marin met them at the side entrance with coffee in one hand and a scanner in the other. She was 46, compact, dark-haired, and known among the K9 unit for telling handlers the truth before they had finished asking for a kinder version of it. Her teal scrubs showed beneath a gray winter coat. Reading glasses hung from a black cord around her neck. Well, she said, looking at Maple through the crate bars. That is either a puppy or a committee of elbows. Maple sneezed. Strong opening argument, Paula said. The exam was careful and quiet. No microchip, mild fleas, mild underweight, no obvious injury, clear eyes, healthy heartbeat. Puppy teeth, German Shepherd, likely 4 or 5 months old, too hungry, too alert, too young to have been safely wandering long. Paula lifted one rear paw and paused. One pale nail, she said. Reed looked closer. The nail on Maple's back foot was lighter than the rest, almost cream-colored against the darker claws. Paula then gently lifted Maple's chin. Beneath the jaw was a small white marking, narrow and soft-edged, easy to miss unless someone knew where to look. Keep those out of the public post, Paula said. I was planning to. Good. Real owners know details. Opportunists know adjectives. Maple tolerated the exam until a metal tray shifted on the counter. The small sound made her jerk so hard that Reed's hand moved instinctively forward. He stopped himself before touching her. Paula noticed, but said nothing. Instead, she set the tray aside and lowered her voice. Several small meals, deworming schedule, flea treatment, No dog parks, no public events, no meeting every friendly Labrador in Harbor Glen. Bishop is one thing if you supervise and he's current on everything. Keep it contained. She won't come inside. Then don't make inside the price of safety. It was the kind of sentence Reed heard twice, once as instruction and once somewhere deeper. After the clinic, he began knocking on doors. The first man he spoke with was near the marina, coiling fishing line beside a garage that smelled of fuel and wet rope. He studied the photo on Reed's phone, squinting under the brim of a wool cap. Seen her by the hose outside the bait shop, he said. Thought she was somebody's. She drank from the puddle under the spigot. Who's somebody? The man looked uncomfortable. Didn't get that far. 2 streets over, a young couple with a baby monitor clipped to the porch rail recognized Maple immediately. The woman pressed one hand to her mouth. Oh, we thought she was yours, she said. She runs toward your end every afternoon. Reed looked at the husband. You ever see her with a collar? No. But she looked familiar, I guess, like she knew where she was going. That phrase followed Reed down the street, like she knew where she was going. At the auto shop near County Road B, the owner wiped his hands on a red rag and nodded before Reed finished asking. Called animal control on a pup like that last week, he said. By the time somebody came by, she was gone. Tracks led behind the storage sheds. I figured she got picked up. She didn't. The man's face tightened. Didn't know that. No one Reed spoke to sounded cruel. That made the day heavier, not lighter. Cruelty could be named and opposed. This was something quieter. Assumptions laid gently on top of one another until a puppy had spent days moving between kindnesses without belonging to any of them. Near the end of Cedar Lane stood a small house painted pale blue, its porch railings wrapped in white lights left over from Christmas. A metal bowl sat beside the steps, clean but empty. Beneath a wicker chair, protected from the wind, lay a folded blanket and a stuffed bear with one ear missing. The woman who opened the door was small and silver-haired, with a blue knit cap pulled low and a cardigan visible beneath her winter coat. Her eyes went to Reed's uniform first, then to the phone in his hand. Oh, she said softly. You found her. You know her? I know that she likes scrambled eggs more than is reasonable. The woman looked past Reed toward the road, as though expecting Maple to appear from the snowbank. I'm Lorna Whitsett. She's been sleeping under my porch most mornings. Reed glanced at the bear. Lorna followed his gaze. She kept trying to curl around my gardening gloves. I gave her that. Less useful to me, more useful to her. Why not bring her inside? From somewhere in the house came a thin, indignant bark, followed by a cough. Lorna's smile faded into apology. That is Mr. Pickle, 16 years old, heart murmur, no teeth worth bragging about, and the soul of a courthouse judge. A puppy would send him to his ancestors by supper. Reed nodded. I thought she belonged to someone near you, Lorna said. She always left before lunch and headed that direction. She looked purposeful, happy even. She comes to my house around 4. For the old dog? Reed looked at her. Lorna's expression gentled. I saw them once, yours and her, through the gap by the maple trees. She wasn't wandering then. She was visiting. The word should have made the situation simpler. It did not. Lorna stepped back inside and returned with the stuffed bear. Up close, it was worse off than Reed had thought. One ear gone, seams repaired with blue thread, fur worn flat along the belly. If she comes back to you tonight, Lorna said, holding it out, she might sleep better with this. Reed took the bear carefully. The drive home was short, but he sat in the SUV for nearly a minute after parking. The bear lay on the passenger seat. The red glove from the first night was in a paper bag on the floorboard. His phone held 8 names, 3 partial sightings, 2 mistaken assumptions, 1 animal control case number, and no owner. Inside the fenced yard, Maple was already waiting. She greeted Bishop first. Reed watched from the gate as she pressed her nose beneath Bishop's jaw, then spun away in a burst of clumsy happiness. Bishop stood through the collision, patient and unmoved, except for the way his tail shifted once behind him. Reed placed the bear under the porch chair. Maple saw it from across the yard. She stopped playing. For the first time since he had met her, she approached something slowly without watching him first. She sniffed the bear, touched the missing ear with her nose, then picked it up by one worn arm and carried it beneath the chair. There she turned twice, settled her paws around it, and rested her chin on its back. Reed felt the quiet weight of it settle in his chest. A glove, a towel, a bear, a puppy collecting the pieces of places that had almost been home. That evening, Reed sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open and wrote the found dog notice. He kept the language plain. Young female German Shepherd found near Harbor Glen, South Lakeside neighborhood. No collar. Proof of ownership required. Contact through County Animal Control or Marin Veterinary Clinic. He attached one photograph. Maple standing in the snow, one ear high, one ear folded, eyes bright. He did not mention the pale nail. He did not mention the white mark under her chin. He sent the notice to Marta, then to Paula Marin, then posted it in the community group. After that he filed the foster update, listed the food, the exam, the flea treatment, the dewormer, and the fact that the dog remained fearful of enclosed thresholds but showed no aggression. Procedure, line by line. When the paperwork was done, Reed carried a warmer towel out to the porch and placed it beside the chair. Maple lifted her head, the bear still between her paws. Bishop stood behind Reed in the doorway, looking past him toward the puppy. "You are not ours," Reed said quietly. Maple blinked. He looked down at Bishop, then back at the small shape beneath the chair. "Not yet." The words were a correction. They did not feel like one. Reed went inside and left the porch light on. The found dog notice was already live. His phone lay face up on the kitchen table, ready to ring with the answer he had asked for. For a long while it did not, and as the snow brightened beneath the yellow porch light, Reed realized he was waiting for two opposite things with the same uneasy heart. For someone to call, and for no one to call at all. Maple learned the porch before she learned the house. She learned which board creaked under Reed's left boot, which corner of the steps stayed dry when snow blew sideways, and which part of the wooden chair cast the warmest shadow when the porch light came on. She learned that Bishop's water bowl inside the kitchen made a faint ceramic sound when he finished drinking. She learned that Reed moved slowly when he came through the back door, and that he never closed the screen while she was standing near it. But she did not learn the threshold, not all at once. For the first few afternoons after the found dog notice went up, Reed found himself measuring progress in inches he would have laughed at years ago. Maple could place both front paws on the porch mat. Maple could stretch her neck into the kitchen far enough to sniff the air. Maple could take a biscuit from the edge of the doorway if Reed set it down and walked away. Then a truck would pass on Cedar Lane, or the furnace would click beneath the floor, or the screen door would shift in a breath of wind, and the small body would vanish backward as if the house itself had shown teeth. Reed did not move the food farther inside. He thought about it once. A shallow bowl placed just beyond the threshold would bring her in. Hunger had already proved stronger than caution on some days. But as soon as the thought formed, it made him uneasy. He had spent too many years watching people comply, because fear, need, or pressure had left them no cleaner choice. Obedience could look like trust from a distance. Up close, the difference mattered. So he changed the house instead of changing the puppy. He covered the metal strip beneath the screen door with a long navy runner he found rolled in the basement. It smelled faintly of dust and old cedar, but it hid the shine of the threshold and gave Maple something soft to grip. He wedged the screen door open with a rubber stop, heavy enough that the wind could not tap it shut. He moved the kitchen trash can away from the entrance because its swinging lid startled her. He turned off the small radio by the sink and stopped leaving spoons near the counter edge. Then he sat sideways at the kitchen table with a notebook open, shoulders turned away from the door. Bishop, however, seemed to have his own ideas. On Tuesday, the retired K9 walked into the mudroom, retrieved an old braided tug rope from the basket beside the bench, and carried it back into the kitchen. The rope had once been blue and white. Years of teeth, snow, and machine washing had turned it the color of gray rope on a dock. Bishop dropped one end on the runner. The other end stayed beneath his paw. Maple stood outside on the porch, head low, uneven ears tilted toward the toy. Reed kept his eyes on the notebook. He did not turn the page. He barely moved. Bishop gave the rope one short shake. Maple stepped onto the runner with both front paws. Her body stretched long through the open doorway, back paws still planted on the porch. She looked absurd and brave, half inside and half outside, as though negotiating with two worlds at once. Her nose touched the frayed rope. Bishop did not pull it away. Maple opened her mouth, caught the end, and gave a sharp little tug. Bishop held. For 3 seconds, the doorway contained a game. Not rescue, not training, not a police problem. A game. Maple's front paws slid on the runner, claws catching. Bishop lowered his head slightly, letting her feel resistance without losing balance. Her tail started moving. She pulled harder, forgot herself, and took one back paw over the threshold. Reed felt the old urge rise in him, mark the success, praise, encourage, turn the moment into a step. He did nothing. The spoon moved anyway. It had been resting near the sink, farther back than usual but not far enough. When the furnace hummed beneath the floor, the counter trembled. The spoon rolled, tipped, and fell into the stainless steel basin with a hard, ringing clang. Maple released the rope as if burned. She spun, slipped, hit one shoulder against the doorframe, and bolted into the yard. Bishop started after her. Bishop, stay. The command came out quiet, but it carried years inside it. Bishop stopped at the doorway, one paw on the runner, ears forward. His body leaned toward the yard. Every part of him wanted to follow. No chasing, Reed said. The dog looked back once. Reed did not repeat himself. Bishop stayed. Outside, Maple had reached the maple tree. She stood behind the trunk with only her head and one awkward ear visible, breathing hard. Her eyes were fixed on the kitchen, not the street, not the fence gap. She had not run away. That mattered. Reed picked up the spoon, set it flat on the counter, and returned to the table. He left the rope where it was. He left the door open. 23 minutes passed before Maple came back to the porch. Reed knew because he watched the clock above the stove and pretended not to. She approached in a half circle, nose low, stepping in her own older prints. She stopped outside the doorway, sniffed the runner, then lay down with her front paws touching the edge of the mat. She did not come in. Reed closed the notebook only after she put her chin down. "That counts," he murmured. Bishop lowered himself on the kitchen side of the runner, facing her. The next few days refused to arrange themselves into a clean story. On Wednesday, Maple crossed the threshold far enough to drink from the small bowl Reed had placed inside the mudroom. She stretched her neck, lapped 3 times, and reversed carefully back to the porch before swallowing. On Thursday, the same bowl might as well have been on the other side of a river. She would not put one paw inside. She sat under the chair with Lorna's one-eared bear between her legs and watched Bishop move through the kitchen as if he belonged to a country she had visited once and no longer trusted. On Friday morning, Reed found faint scratches on the outside of the shed door. He stood there, longer than the marks deserved. The shed latch he had repaired badly now held firm. The door did not rattle in the wind anymore. Reed imagined a puppy small enough to slip through gaps, searching for shelter during the storm, following warmth into some garage or storage shed where the wind later shoved a door shut behind her. He pictured the metal sound of a latch, the sudden dark, the impossible smoothness of a floor under paws that could not find traction. He could not know if any of that had happened. Paula Marin would have told him not to build a whole history out of a flinch. She would have been right. Still, not knowing did not mean ignoring what the body remembered. Maple did not fear hands. She did not fear Bishop. She did not even fear Reed exactly. She feared closing. She feared being where exit became permission someone else controlled. That distinction settled into Reed with uncomfortable familiarity. At the station that afternoon, Lieutenant Carl Baines found him in the community room, sorting winter safety flyers into stacks for the elementary school visit. Baines was 55, square-built, and compact in a way that made him seem heavier than he was. His gray-streaked mustache was trimmed with the same discipline as his uniform, and his dark navy jacket looked as if Snow would ask permission before landing on it. "I got a call from Marta Quinley," Baines said. Reed did not stop stacking flyers. "She likes to share. She likes paperwork clean, so do I. It's clean, that's what I'm checking." Baines picked up one flyer, glanced at the cartoon child wearing a life vest over a winter coat, and set it down. "You're fostering a found dog at your residence. Emergency foster. Pending owner search. Exam, Marin, no chip. Mild fleas, deworming schedule started. Public contact, no. Bishop supervised. Controlled yard." Baines watched him for a moment. The lieutenant's face did not soften often, but it had ways of becoming less hard. This was one of them. "Reed," he said, "a kind mistake is still a mistake when you're wearing a badge." The words landed quietly, which made them harder to dismiss. "I know. Do you?" Reed looked up then. Baines did not posture. He did not lecture. He had been Reed's supervisor long enough to know that shame did not make him safer or smarter. "If the owner shows up and says you kept the dog too long, I need a record. If the dog bites somebody, I need a record. If some neighbor decides the department is stealing puppies now, I need a record. You'll have one. I don't need one because I enjoy binders. I need one because feelings get people sloppy." Reed's jaw tightened before he could stop it. Baines saw it. That wasn't a shot. It sounded close. It was a warning. There's a difference. For a moment, neither man spoke. Outside the community room windows, school children crossed the sidewalk in bright coats, escorted by a teacher who held one mittened hand in the air like a crossing flag. The world kept producing people who needed protection in ways no manual could fully cover. Baines lowered his voice. "You're good with frightened things when you remember not to crowd them." Reed stared at the flyers. That sentence reached farther back than Maple. Both men knew it. "I'll keep the file updated," Reed said. Baines nodded. "Do that, and don't buy a collar unless it says temporary." It was almost humor, almost. By evening, snow fell harder. Not a storm, not yet, but enough to blur the fence line and soften the road noise into something distant. Reed came home with a portable heater rated for enclosed rooms, a second runner from the hardware store, and a pack of rubber doorstops. He placed the heater in the mudroom far from any fabric, tested the cord, checked the outlet, and set it low. Warmth gathered slowly near the floor. Maple arrived at 4:17 later than usual, wet along her back and shivering despite the energy in her tail. She played only a few minutes before retreating beneath the porch chair with the bear. Bishop stood in the yard and looked at Reed. "I see it," Reed said. He opened the screen door and wedged it firmly. The runner now reached from the porch, across the threshold, through the mudroom, and into the edge of the kitchen. The light above the stove stayed on. The rest of the house remained dim. Reed placed Bishop's towel in the mudroom, not too far inside. Beside it, he set the one-eared bear, then thought better of it and moved the bear back to the porch. Maple could decide what came with her. He sat on the kitchen floor this time, back against the lower cabinets, one knee raised, hands resting where she could see them. Bishop lay on the runner just inside the mudroom with his head on his paws. No rope, no food, no performance. Outside, Maple watched from beneath the chair. Snow collected on the porch rail behind her. Once, she rose and took 2 steps toward the doorway, then returned for the bear. She picked it up by its remaining ear, dropped it, picked it up again by the arm, and stood with it, hanging from her mouth. Reed looked away. The furnace clicked. Maple froze. The heater hummed low and steady. Bishop did not move. Minutes passed in the small sounds of winter. Snow tapping the porch screen, the house settling in the cold, Bishop breathing through his nose. Maple came to the doorway and stopped with the bear clenched between her teeth. Her front paws touched the runner. She looked at Reed, then at Bishop, then at the open dark behind her. Reed felt the old world inside him make its argument. Close the distance, secure the outcome, help by deciding. He let the argument pass. Maple stepped inside. Not far. Not bravely in any way that would look dramatic from outside. She placed one paw, then another, then gathered her back legs under her with careful concentration. The bear dragged beneath her chin. She crossed the threshold and stood fully in the mudroom, every muscle ready to reverse. No one praised her. No one moved toward her. Bishop lifted his eyes, but not his head. Maple circled once on the towel. The tile beneath the second runner did not betray her feet. She sniffed the heater from a safe distance, sneezed, then returned to the towel. After another minute, she set the bear down, lowered herself, and folded her legs beneath her body. Her eyes stayed open. Reed remained on the kitchen floor until his back began to ache. At some point, Bishop shifted closer to the doorway, not blocking it, only placing himself where Maple could see him if she woke. The screen door stayed wedged open behind her, letting in a thin blade of cold air. Reed could feel it against his ankles. He could have closed it. He did not. Near midnight, he reached carefully for the blanket draped over the kitchen chair and pulled it around his shoulders. Bishop slept with his nose pointed toward the porch. Maple slept on the towel for short, cautious stretches, waking whenever the house clicked or sighed, then lowering her head again when nothing came for her. The open door made the mudroom cold. It also made the room possible. Before dawn, Reed woke from a half-sleep on the floor. The porch beyond the screen was blue with early light. Snow had stopped. The world outside looked clean and distant. Maple was still inside. The one-eared bear rested against her chest. Bishop lay a few feet away, not on his old bed, not in his usual place, but between the puppy and the deeper rooms of the house. Not guarding against her, guarding the space around her. Reed sat without moving for a long time. Then, very quietly, he reached for the notebook on the floor beside him and wrote one line beneath the behavior log. First full night in mudroom. Door remained open, no force used. He looked at the words. They were plain. They were procedural. They would satisfy Marta, Paula, Baines, anyone who needed the record to make sense. They did not say what had actually happened. They did not say that a frightened puppy had crossed a line because no one had turned it into a trap. They did not say that an old K9 had understood patience better than most people. They did not say that Reed Callahan, who had spent half his life closing distance to make situations safe, had stayed still long enough for something scared to come closer on its own. Maple stirred, her uneven ears shifted, her eyes opened, found Bishop first, then Reed. She did not run. Reed closed the notebook. "Morning, Maple," he whispered. The puppy put her chin back on the bear and sighed into the quiet mudroom, while the door behind her remained open to the snow. Began to change. The first night inside did not make Maple civilized. It only made her present. Reed learned the difference before sunrise. At 4:38 in the morning, a soft scraping sound came from the mudroom, followed by the hollow clack of something plastic tipping over. Reed opened his eyes on the kitchen floor, stiff in the shoulders, half covered by the blanket he had pulled from the chair sometime after midnight. For one disoriented second, he thought the old crisis call alert was going off in his head again, that unpleasant inward alarm that never made sound but brought him fully awake. Then Maple appeared in the doorway. She stood over Bishop's empty water bowl, with the one-eared bear hanging sideways from her mouth. Her tail moved cautiously, as if she was pleased with herself, but unsure whether morning had been officially approved. Bishop lifted his head from the runner, looked at the bowl, looked at Reed, and put his chin back down. "Very helpful," Reed muttered. Maple wagged harder. The day began there, not with a breakthrough, not with soft music or a perfect new bond, but with Reed kneeling in wool socks on the mudroom floor, wiping up spilled water while a German shepherd puppy tried to carry the rag away by one corner. By breakfast, she had relieved herself once near the boot tray. By 7, she had discovered that the lower cabinet doors made a satisfying wooden knock when pushed with her nose. By 8, she had taken Reed's left slipper beneath the kitchen table and arranged it beside the bear, as though beginning a private collection of important household evidence. Reed stood in the doorway with a mug of coffee in his hand and stared at the slipper. Maple stared back. Her ears were still uneven. The upright one gave her an expression of alertness. The folded one betrayed the truth that she was mostly improvising. "You understand," Reed said, "that stealing from a police officer is generally discouraged." Maple placed one paw over the slipper. Bishop, who had once tracked a burglary suspect through sleet and flooded brush, gave no assistance whatsoever. Reed cleaned the mudroom without raising his voice. He opened the back door after Maple ate, then again after she played, then again when she began circling the same square of tile with sudden concentration. Twice he caught the signal in time. Once he did not. Each time he added a note to the behavior log, not because the mess required documentation, but because the rhythm did. Outside after waking, outside after meals, outside after play, small meals, medication with food, fresh water, porch exit open when possible, no public contact. Observe startle response. The sentences looked clinical on paper. In practice, they meant towels by the door, gloves left where Reed could grab them quickly, boots half-laced before coffee, and Bishop waiting with patient displeasure while Maple tried to decide whether Snow was a bathroom, a playground, or both. The house adjusted around her. A baby gate went between the mudroom and the deeper kitchen, not to trap her, but to make the space smaller and easier to understand. Reed moved his boots to the bench after Maple tried to drag one by the lace. The trash can went into the pantry. The metal bowls were replaced with heavier ceramic ones that did not skid. The old Navy runner stayed across the threshold. A second runner covered the tile. The screen door still opened often. That mattered most. Whenever Maple's eyes sharpened and her body lowered, Reed did not crowd her with comfort. He simply gave her a way out. Sometimes she stepped onto the porch, shook herself, and came back in after a minute. Sometimes she stayed outside under the chair with the bear. The return mattered more than the leaving. Reed began to understand that the house was not becoming safe because it held her. It was becoming safe because it released her and remained there when she came back. By the second afternoon, Bishop's patience found its first hard edge. Maple had been exploring the mudroom while Reed sorted laundry in the hallway. Bishop's old cushion lay near the warm side of the kitchen, close enough to the back door for him to monitor weather, footsteps, and the possibility of unauthorized squirrels. The cushion was faded at the edges and flattened in the center from years of use. Bishop cared about it with the quiet intensity of a retired officer who said he did not care about his assigned parking space. Maple approached the cushion with the one-eared bear in her mouth. Bishop watched. She placed one paw on the edge. Bishop stood. He did not growl. He did not bare his teeth. He simply stepped between Maple and the center of the bed, broad chest still, head lowered slightly, amber eyes fixed on her with absolute clarity. Maple tried to go around him. Bishop moved one step. She tried the other side. Bishop moved again. Reed turned from the laundry basket, ready to call him away. The command formed in his throat. Bishop, leave it. He did not say it. Maple was not being attacked. Bishop was not being unfair. A boundary was happening, and boundaries were not failures of kindness. Reed had been slow to learn that in his own life. The job had taught him to read danger quickly. It had not always taught him to distinguish danger from discomfort. Maple stopped trying to pass. She looked up at Bishop, then down at the bear, then at the very edge of the cushion. Carefully, she lowered herself onto the corner of it, not claiming the middle, not touching Bishop's paws. She tucked the bear beneath her chin. Bishop stood over her for a long moment. The kitchen was silent, except for the dryer turning somewhere in the back hall. Then Bishop looked at Reed. It was not a request for permission. It was more complicated than that. The old K9 looked almost offended by the amount of moral growth being required of him before dinner. Reed swallowed against an unexpected tightness. Bishop turned away from the cushion and lay down on the runner near the door. Maple stayed on the edge of the bed, her eyes closed in small increments, as though sleep had to earn access too. Reed stood with one hand on the laundry basket and understood that Bishop had not become smaller by giving up space. If anything, he seemed larger there on the runner, dignified and mildly resentful, guarding the room without needing the best place in it. Later, Reed brought an extra folded blanket from the hall closet and placed it beside the kitchen table. Where Bishop could see the door and still have a corner no puppy was allowed to invade. "This is yours," Reed told him. Bishop sniffed it, stepped over it, and lay on the floor beside it. Reed nodded. Of course. Lorna Whitsett came by the next afternoon with a foil-covered plate and a small tin box tucked under her arm. She stood on the porch, stamping snow from her boots, cheeks pink from the cold, pale blue knit cap pulled low over silver curls. I brought apple bars, she said, and medical assistance for a bear. Maple heard Lorna's voice before Reed opened the door. She trotted to the mudroom gate, bare in mouth, then stopped when the screen shifted. Her paws held steady on the runner. That alone would have been impossible 3 days earlier. Lorna stepped inside only after Reed waved her in. She moved carefully, not bending over Maple, not reaching too soon. The old woman had the kind of patience that came from living with fragile creatures and not taking offense at fear. "Well, look at you," Lorna said softly, "inside and everything." Maple approached one step at a time. She sniffed Lorna's boots, the hem of her coat, then the tin box. When Lorna sat on the mudroom bench, Maple placed the bear against her shoe. "I see the ear is gone again," Lorna said. "It lasted almost 12 hours, Reed said. A record. Then we celebrate progress." While Bishop watched from his blanket that was not being used, Lorna threaded a needle with blue thread and began sewing the bear's torn side. Her hands were small, knotted at the knuckles, but steady. She told Reed how Maple had first appeared under her porch near dawn, curled tight against the wind, too tired to run and too proud to come closer. "I gave her scrambled eggs once," Lorna admitted. "That explains some expectations. She looked hungry. She is excellent at looking hungry. She put her chin on that bear like a child with a pillow." Lorna tugged the thread through the worn fabric. "I kept telling myself someone must be expecting her. She never looked lost when she left. That was the trouble. She looked like she had somewhere important to go." Reed glanced toward Bishop. Maple sat at Lorna's feet, watching the bear repair with complete seriousness. Lorna tied off the thread and handed the bear back. Maple seized it by the newly repaired ear. "No," Reed and Lorna said together. Maple froze. Bishop sighed. The ear survived 4 minutes. Lorna laughed so hard she had to wipe her eyes. The sound warmed the kitchen in a way the heater never quite managed. For a little while, the house held all of them, the old woman with thread in her lap, the retired K9 pretending not to watch the puppy, Reed standing with coffee gone cold in his hand, and Maple dismantling the proof that someone had tried to mend what she loved. That evening, after Lorna left, Reed sat at the table and read the incident report from the crisis call again. He had not meant to open it. The file lived in a folder on his laptop marked Training Review, though he had not used it for any training. The words were familiar enough to feel carved into him. Subject contained. Exits covered. Verbal engagement attempted. Movement unexpected. Slip and fall. No policy violation. No policy violation. Reed leaned back and listened to Maple breathing on Bishop's cushion. Bishop lay near the table, not quite on the blanket, but closer to it than before. There had been a door in that garage. There had been officers near it. There had been Reed's voice, steady and controlled, telling a frightened young man to stay where he was. At the time, every choice had made sense. Every position had a reason. Every person involved could explain why the scene had been secured that way. But safety, Reed was beginning to learn, could become a shape that frightened things mistook for a cage. He closed the file. The next morning, Maple let him touch her collar area for the first time. It happened without ceremony. She was sitting near the mudroom gate while Reed prepared her small breakfast and measured the medication Paula had prescribed. A lightweight red temporary collar lay on the counter. Marta had said identification mattered even in foster. Paula had agreed. Reed had bought one that very clearly looked temporary and then spent 2 days not putting it on her. Maple sniffed the collar when he held it out. Bishop sat nearby, steady as a witness. Reed touched 2 fingers to the side of Maple's neck. She stiffened but did not retreat. He waited. Her eyes moved to the open back door, then to Bishop. After a long moment, her shoulders lowered. Reed clipped the collar gently. The sound was small. Maple flinched, but stayed. "Good," Reed whispered, then stopped himself from saying more. "Not praise is pressure. Not celebration as a trap, just good. At the recheck appointment that afternoon, Maple rode in the open crate with Bishop's towel beneath her and the one-eared bear tucked against. Reed sat beside the crate in the back of the SUV, one hand resting on the floor where she could see it. Bishop remained at home behind the mudroom gate, offended but safe. Paula had been firm, routine exam, no unnecessary stress, one dog at a time. Maple trembled when they entered the clinic, especially when the front door hissed shut behind them. Reed turned her crate so she could see the side exit. Paula Marin noticed and gave a single approving nod. "Weight's up," Paula said after the exam. "Not much, but enough to make me less annoyed at the universe." Maple nosed the pocket of Paula's scrub top. "No, you cannot have the thermometer." Reed allowed himself a tired smile. "Flay treatment is working," Paula continued. "No fever, stool sample looks better, keep meals small, keep the environment predictable. She can remain in foster while the owner search continues." There it was again, foster. The word belonged on forms. It was accurate, useful, clean. It also landed in Reed's chest like a reminder wrapped in paper. Temporary. Paula capped her pen and looked at him over her glasses. "You heard that part. I heard it. She's doing better because you're giving her structure without possession. That sounds like something you practiced. That sounds like something people need to be told before they order engraved tags." Reed glanced at Maple. The puppy was lying on the exam mat with the bear between her paws, one ear upright, one folded, red temporary collar bright against her darkening fur. "I haven't ordered anything." "Good," I looked. Paula's expression did not change. Reed looked away, briefly. On the drive home, snow fell in thin silver lines across the windshield. Maple slept most of the way, waking only when the tires crunched over the packed snow in Reed's driveway. When he opened the crate, she did not bolt. She stepped out, shook herself, and went straight to the back door. Bishop was waiting on the other side of the gate with his ball in his mouth. Maple saw him and wagged so hard she nearly dropped the bear. Reed opened the door and watched her cross the threshold into the mudroom without stopping. Not because she had forgotten fear. Because the house had kept its promise often enough for one more step to make sense. That night, after the medication chart was updated and the towels were hung to dry, Reed stood in the kitchen with the foster file open on the table. Maple slept on the edge of Bishop's old cushion. Bishop slept near the table, one paw finally resting on the folded blanket Reed had given him. The house was not orderly anymore. There were paw prints near the door, a torn towel in the laundry sink, a slipper beneath the table, a bear with one ear repaired badly and chewed worse, and two dogs breathing in different corners of the same warm room. Reed wrote the day's final note. Recheck complete. Weight improved. Foster continues pending owner. He stared at the sentence longer than necessary. Then he added, after a pause, Maple entered house voluntarily after return. It was still procedural. It still failed to say enough. The house became accustomed to the sound of two dogs before Reed was ready to admit it had. There were small proofs everywhere. The little ceramic bowl stayed against the mudroom wall, no longer washed and put away after each meal. The braided rope lay in the middle of the runner like a treaty neither dog had signed but both respected. The one-eared bear moved from Bishop's old cushion to the porch chair, then back again, carried by Maple with the solemn purpose of a courier trusted with state documents. The new puppy bed arrived on a Thursday morning in a box printed with smiling dogs and cheerful promises about comfort. Maple sniffed it once. Then she climbed onto Bishop's old cushion, turned around twice with the bear in her mouth, and collapsed in the exact middle of the bed as if the purchase had been made for another household entirely. Bishop stood over the new bed, inspected it with professional skepticism, and walked away. "Good," Reed said, cutting the box open wider. "Nobody likes anything I pay for." Maple thumped her tail against the old cushion. Reed put the new bed near the mudroom wall anyway. He did not return it. Some things stayed because a person needed a harmless place to put hope. The days had developed a rhythm that felt almost sturdy. Maple still woke too early, though she no longer announced morning by knocking over bowls. She had learned that breakfast came after the back door opened, and not before, and that Reed would stand outside in his coat until she finished sniffing the same 3 patches of snow every day. She tolerated the temporary red collar. She accepted medicine tucked into a small portion of food. She had stopped flinching at the coffee maker, though the screen latch remained her enemy. Bishop changed too, in quieter ways. He still watched the back door around 4, but not alone. If Maple was sleeping, he would stand near the cushion until she lifted her head. He did not nudge her. He did not whine. He simply waited with the grave patience of a retired officer who believed schedules existed for the improvement of others. When she finally got up, he collected the rubber ball and carried it to the mudroom, not as a command, but as an announcement. Reed noticed himself building sentences around them. Bishop needs his medication. Maple needs smaller meals. They should go out before the snow starts again. The word appeared without permission and stayed. He did not delete the found dog post. He did not order an engraved tag. He did not call Maple his. Every update to Marta Quinley remained accurate. Every note in the foster log used the correct terms. Young female German Shepherd. Temporary care. Owner search active. But the mind had ways of making rooms before paperwork did. Reed imagined spring with the yard thawed soft beneath 2 sets of paws. He imagined Bishop lying under the maple while maples chased leaves that did not require catching. He imagined the kitchen noisier, less exact, less shaped around the habits of one man and one old K9. He imagined buying a second leash and pretending it was only practical. Then, on a pale Saturday afternoon, the phone rang. Marin Veterinary Clinic. Reed stared at the name on the screen. Maple was asleep on Bishop's cushion with the bear tucked under her chin. Bishop lay on the runner near the table, one paw touching the edge of the folded blanket he had finally accepted. Snowlight filled the kitchen, clean and quiet, turning every ordinary object into something fragile. The phone rang again. Reed answered. Callahan. Paula Marin did not waste words. She never had. I may have your owner. The kitchen seemed to lose a degree of warmth. Reed looked at Maple. Paula continued, her voice careful now, not soft, but aware. A woman saw the post after it got shared into the North Shore Livestock and Homestead group. She says the puppy's name is Tessa. Missing almost 3 weeks. Reed did not move. She knew about the pale rear nail, Paula said. There were details a person could explain away. That was not one of them. The pale nail had never been in the public post. It was not in Marta's visible listing. It had been in the clinic file, the animal control record, and Reed's notes. A stranger could guess a German Shepherd's color. A hopeful liar could claim affection. But a pale nail on a back foot was not a lucky sentence people invented. What's her name? Reed asked. Rachel Fenner. 39. Small place north of the old rail spur, past the pine cutover. She has records from North Bend Veterinary for the mother dog and litter. I told her not to drive straight to your house without confirmation. Good. She cried when I told her the puppy was alive. Reed closed his eyes for 1 second. That was worse, somehow. A careless owner would have been easier to resist. A cold owner would have given his hurt somewhere clean to stand. But relief on the other end of a phone left no villain in the room. I'll call her, Reed said. Paula was quiet for a moment. Raid, I know, do you? He opened his eyes. Maple had stirred at his voice but had not lifted her head. Bishop was watching him now. Paula spoke again, lower. Doing this right is part of what you gave her. The line went silent after she hung up. Reed remained at the table with the phone in his hand. On the counter, the temporary collar packaging still lay behind the coffee can. The new puppy bed sat untouched by the mudroom wall. On the laptop screen, the found dog notice waited in an open tab, innocent and successful. He had asked the town to answer. Now it had. Rachel Fenner arrived an hour later, not in a hurry that made noise, but with the careful restraint of someone afraid that one wrong movement might break the truth. Her older green pickup stopped at the curb rather than pulling into Reed's driveway. A dent creased the passenger door. The bed held straw, a shovel, and 2 covered feed bins strapped down with bungee cords. She got out and stood beside the gate. She was taller than Reed expected, narrow from work rather than fragility, wearing a faded brown work jacket over a moss-green sweater. Her blonde hair was tied low at the back of her neck, and loose strands had escaped around her face. Cold had reddened her cheeks and knuckles. She held a folder against her chest with both hands. Reed stepped outside in his dark navy jacket. Bishop came to the porch but stayed behind the closed gate. Maple was in the yard, dragging the braided rope through shallow snow with great determination. Rachel looked past Reed. Her face changed before she said anything. Not dramatically, not with a gasp or a cry. The change was smaller and harder to watch. Her mouth parted, her shoulders dropped, and all the force that had been holding her upright seemed to move into her hands around the folder. Reed opened the side gate, but did not invite her in yet. "Let her see you first," he said. Rachel nodded quickly. She crouched in the snow outside the fence, careful not to reach through the slats. Her voice came out barely above the wind. "Tessa!" Maple froze. The rope fell from her mouth. Bishop's ears lifted. For several seconds, nothing moved. Maple stood in the middle of the yard with one paw raised, head tilted toward the sound of the name she had not heard in Reed's house. Then her body changed. Not into simple joy, not exactly. Recognition moved through her unevenly, like warmth coming back into a numb hand. She ran toward the gate. Halfway there, she stopped and looked back at Bishop. Bishop remained where he was, tall and still on the porch, the old canine's gaze steady. Rachel whispered the name again. "Tessa, baby." Maple turned back and ran the rest of the way. She pressed her nose between the slats. Rachel lowered her face close, but kept her hands on her own knees, trembling with the effort not to grab. Maple sniffed her sleeve, then the front of her jacket, then pushed her muzzle harder through the fence. Her tail began to move. Reed felt the answer settle before the proof was shown. Inside the kitchen, Rachel placed the folder on the table as though setting down something sacred. She did not sit until Reed asked. Even then, she perched on the edge of the chair, eyes moving constantly toward the mudroom gate where Maple stood with Bishop behind her. "I've been looking north," Rachel said. Her voice was rough from either cold or exhaustion. "All this time, I've been looking north." She opened the folder. There were vaccination records for a German Shepherd dam named Runa, notes from North Bend Veterinary, a printed photograph of 6 puppies on a blanket, and several dates circled in blue pen. Rachel handed over her phone next. The video was 3 weeks old. A black and tan mother dog lay in a heated outbuilding while 6 puppies climbed over one another with blind confidence. The smallest female had one ear beginning to lift and a pale smudge beneath her chin. Rachel paused the video with her thumb. "That's her," she said, "smallest girl. We called her Tessa because she kept testing every corner of the pen before the others even opened their eyes properly." Reed enlarged the image. The white mark under the chin was there. He looked down at Maple. She sat at the mudroom gate with the one-eared bear now in front of her paws, watching Rachel as if trying to arrange 2 lives inside one head. Reed knelt and gently lifted Maple's chin. She allowed it, eyes still on Rachel. The white mark matched. He checked the rear foot. The pale nail matched. Rachel pressed one fist against her mouth. "I didn't leave her," she said suddenly. Reed looked up. The words had come out too fast, as if she had been carrying them for days and could not bear letting them wait politely. "I know you don't know me," Rachel continued. "I know people say things. But I didn't leave her out there. I didn't say you did. No, but—" She stopped, took a breath, and stared at the table. The side gate didn't latch. I was moving clean straw and feed from the shed. Wind kept catching the door. I counted them after, and there were 5. I thought she was behind Runa. Then I looked. Again, her hands opened on the table. I searched the ditch line first, then the road, then the old rail spur. Snow came hard that night. By morning, the tracks were gone. I called North Bend. I called the county shelter. I posted in the Homestead group, the Lost Pets group, the North Road Bulletin. I put flyers at the feed store. Her eyes lifted toward Maple. I thought maybe someone had taken her in. Then after a week, I started thinking that was just the story I needed, because the other one was worse. The room held, still around the confession. Reed had heard many people explain themselves over the years. Some explanations tried to escape blame. Some tried to rearrange facts until guilt had nowhere to land. Rachel's did neither. She did not make the wind sound like an enemy. She did not make herself blameless. She simply described a door that had failed, a count that had come up wrong, and a search that had gone in the wrong direction. "The rail spur connects behind Cedar Lane," Reed said. Rachel nodded. "There's a deer path through the pines. I checked the north side. I didn't know it opened near your neighborhood until Paula showed me the map. Two halves of a town. Two sets of people thinking the answer lived somewhere else." Maple had walked through the seam between them. Rachel opened another photo. In it, Tessa slept beside the mother dog with her chin on a folded towel. No bear, no red collar, no bishop's cushion. A life before Reed's house, complete without him. That was the part that hurt most. Not that Rachel had proof. That the proof showed love had existed before Maple arrived at his door. Reed had not saved an abandoned thing from a world that did not want her. He had sheltered a lost thing until the world that wanted her could find the right road. He had no righteous anger to stand behind, no reason to delay, no claim that could be made without turning his care into theft. Rachel looked at him across the table. "I want to pay you back. The clinic, medication, food, anything. That isn't necessary." "It is." The firmness surprised him. Rachel's voice did not rise, but it steadied. "She needed care, and you gave it. If I don't take responsibility for that part too, then I'm only taking back the easy half." Reed thought of Baines in the community room, saying a kind mistake was still a mistake when a badge was involved. He thought of Marta's case number, Paula's notes, the word Foster on every form. He thought of Maple asleep on Bishop's cushion, and of how badly he wanted love to be enough to bend the facts. Rachel taking responsibility did not lessen what Reed had done. It completed it. He nodded once. "Clinic and medication only. The food's open. She can take it with her." Rachel's eyes shone, but she did not cry. "Thank you." Maple shifted at the gate. Bishop stood behind her, close enough that her side touched his chest. The red temporary collar circled her neck. The one-eared bear lay between her paws. Rachel watched all of it and understood more than Reed wanted her to. "She looks safe here," she said. "She is." The words came out before he could soften them. Rachel nodded. "I'm glad. That was generous of her." It also made the room ache. Reed stood and closed the Foster file on the table. He did not remove Maple's bowl. He did not pack the bear. Not yet. There would be time for the practical things, and the practical things deserved care. For the moment, there was only the truth, sitting quietly in his kitchen with snowlight on the floor. Maple was Tessa. Tessa had a home, and Reed, who had spent days teaching a frightened puppy that an open door was not a trap, now had to prove he believed it by opening his own hands. The morning Tessa went home was bright enough to feel unfair. Snow had fallen lightly before dawn, covering the yard in a clean layer that hid the paw prints from the day before. The sky over Harbor Glen was pale blue, washed thin by winter sun. Along the fence, ice clung to the wire in small shining beads. Nothing about the day looked like an ending. No storm bent the trees. No dark clouds crowded the lake. The world seemed determined to look gentle while asking Reed to do something that was not. He stood in the mudroom with a canvas bag open on the bench. The bag had belonged to him for years, used mostly for winter safety demonstrations at schools. Extra gloves, reflective tape, sample ice picks, laminated maps of frozen shoreline hazards. Now it held a different kind of instruction. Paula Marin's printed care sheet went in first: feeding schedule, deworming dates, flea treatment, notes about small meals and slow transitions. Reed folded the paper once, then unfolded it and slid it into a plastic sleeve so snowmelt would not ruin it. Next came the remaining medication, labeled clearly. Then a container of the same food Maple had been eating. Tessa, he corrected himself, though the name still felt too new in his mouth. Maple had been the name of the porch, the runner, the first night inside. Tessa was the name that belonged to the life she had lost and was about to re-enter. Both names felt true. Only one was his to use temporarily. He added a towel Bishop had slept near, not his favorite one, but one carrying enough of him to matter. Then he placed the one-eared bear in the bag and paused. The bear looked worse than when Lorna had brought it over. The repaired seam had been worried loose again. One stitched ear hung at an angle, already doomed. The belly fur was flattened from Tessa's chin. It was a ridiculous object to handle with care. Reed handled it with care anyway. The braided rope lay on the bench beside the bag. That was harder. Bishop had carried that rope through half the house to invite a frightened puppy across the threshold. The rope had been the first game in the doorway, the first proof that inside did not always mean trapped. It belonged to Bishop's old basket. It also belonged to Tessa now in ways Reed could not sort without making himself smaller. Bishop stood at the mudroom gate, watching. "You know," Reed said, "this was yours first." Bishop's ears remained forward. Reed picked up the rope, ran his thumb over the chewed gray strands, and placed it in the bag. "If she needs something familiar," he said quietly, "you can give up one more thing." Bishop did not look noble. He looked like a German shepherd who had been asked for too much before breakfast. That helped Reed more than dignity would have. Rachel arrived at 10. Her green pickup stopped in the same place by the curb. This time she brought a crate secured behind the front seats, lined with clean straw and a folded blanket. She had tied the side gate of the truck bed shut with a second strap, even though Dog rode there. Reed noticed the redundancy and respected it. People who had lost something once often began tying every latch twice. Rachel came through the gate only after Reed opened it. Her hair was tucked under a cream knit cap, and her brown work jacket had a fresh dusting of snow on the shoulders. She carried a leash in one hand, but it stayed loose at her side. Her eyes went first to Tessa, then to Bishop, then to Reed. No one rushed. Tessa was in the yard with the bear at her feet, wearing the temporary red collar. At the sound of the gate, she lifted her head. She saw Rachel and stood, uncertain for half a second, as though the two houses inside her had both opened doors at once. Rachel crouched. "Tessa." The puppy ran to her. This time she did not stop halfway. She pressed into Rachel's knees, tail thrashing, body folding, and twisting with recognition that had finally found permission to be happy. Rachel closed one hand gently against Tessa's shoulder, not gripping, only touching enough to say, "There, there, there." Her eyes turned wet, but she did not sob. Reed was grateful for that. Loud grief would have made the moment belong to people. This one needed to belong to the dog. Bishop stepped down from the porch. Slowly, he crossed the yard with his head level and his body controlled. Tessa turned when she heard him, still pressed against Rachel. The puppy's tail changed rhythm, faster, wilder, almost panicked with wanting both directions. Rachel clipped the leash to the red collar. Bishop stopped within reach. Tessa looked from Rachel to Bishop, then twisted toward the open canvas bag on the bench just inside the mudroom. The braided rope protruded from the top. She lunged for it. Rachel did not jerk the leash. Reed did not move to stop her. Tessa caught one end of the rope and pulled it partly free. Bishop took the other end. For a few seconds the yard held still around them. There was no game in it, no growling, no wagging challenge, no clumsy backward bounce. Tessa stood with the rope in her mouth, Rachel's leash loose behind her. Bishop held the other end, his paws planted in snow, his scarred ear lifted against the light. Reed placed one hand on Bishop's shoulder. He could feel the dog's strength beneath the fur. Age had not taken that. Retirement had not taken it. Grief would not take it either, though it might change where the strength had to go. "Easy," Reed whispered. Bishop's jaw remained closed around the rope. Tessa gave one small tug. Bishop did not answer. Then, without command, without praise, without anyone winning, Bishop opened his mouth. The rope slid free. Tessa backed toward Rachel with the rope hanging from her teeth. She stopped once at the gate and looked at Bishop. Bishop stayed beside Reed. Rachel's face tightened with understanding. "I can leave the rope." "No," Reed said. The word came out too quickly, so he softened the rest. "Take it. For a few days at least." Rachel nodded. Inside, Reed went over the care sheet with her at the kitchen table. He kept his voice steady because instructions were easier than farewell. Small meals. Watch the stool after the dewormer. Do not change food suddenly. Keep the bed area predictable. No hard door closing near her for a while. Let her see the exit if she panics. Give her time with the mother dog, but not too much activity the first day. Rachel listened as if every sentence mattered. She may not sleep through the night, Reed said. I won't either. It was not a joke. He looked down at the bag by her boots. If she has trouble settling, call Paula or call me. He stopped there. There were other words available. Warm ones, dangerous ones. She always has a place here. Bring her back anytime. Bishop will miss her. I will too. They were true in the way weather could be true and still not belong in a forecast. Said aloud, they might make the boundary softer than it needed to be. They might place Rachel in debt to his sadness. They might turn a return into a negotiation, so Reed said only what was useful. Don't close doors fast the first few days. Rachel nodded, eyes red now. I won't. When she carried the bag out, Tessa followed with the rope still clenched in her mouth and the bear tucked under one front leg in a way that made walking inefficient. Rachel opened the truck door and gave her time. Tessa sniffed the crate, stepped in, backed out once, then stepped in again when Rachel placed Bishop's towel at the front. Reed stood beside the gate with Bishop. Tessa turned inside the crate. Her paws came up against the door. Rachel latched it carefully, then checked it twice. Thank you, she said. Reed nodded. He did not trust his voice with anything larger. The pickup pulled away slowly, tires pressing dark tracks into the new snow. Bishop walked to the end of the yard and stood there until the truck disappeared beyond the curve of Cedar Lane. Even after the engine faded, he remained at the fence, staring at the empty road. Reed did not call him back. The house was too quiet that evening in a way that did not reveal itself all at once. At dinner, Reed opened the cabinet and removed Bishop's bowl. His hand closed automatically around the smaller ceramic bowl beside it. He took both down before realizing what he had done. For a moment, he stood in the kitchen, holding one bowl in each hand. The smaller one was clean. Its rim still had a faint chip from the morning Maple had knocked it against the boot tray. Reed could remember the exact sound. He could remember being irritated and then not irritated. He could remember thinking he should buy a sturdier one if she stayed. Bishop waited near the usual place. Reed set the large bowl down. The smaller bowl remained in his left hand, absurdly light. He returned it to the cabinet slowly. That was the worst of it. Not the truck leaving, not Rachel's red eyes, not the rope sliding from Bishop's mouth. The worst was that his hands remembered a life the house no longer had before his mind could prepare him for the absence. Bishop ate without enthusiasm. Afterward, he went to the back door at 4, although 4 had already passed. He picked up his black rubber ball and placed it on the runner. Then he lay beside it and watched the screen. No scratches came. Reed sat at the table with his coffee cooling in front of him. The next day, Bishop did the same. And the next. Routine, once broken, did not immediately become grief. Sometimes it simply repeated itself in the shape of what was missing. Reed kept the old cushion unwashed. He told himself Bishop still liked the smell of it. That was partly true. It was also true that Reed was not ready to erase the mixed scent of 2 dogs from the fabric. The new puppy bed remained by the mudroom wall, unused and almost offensive in its cheerfulness. On Thursday, Reed loaded it into his SUV and drove it to the county shelter. Marta Quinley met him at the side entrance wearing a gray county jacket and the expression of someone already late to 3 problems. Unused? She asked, looking at the bed, completely rejected. Puppies have strong opinions and no income. She took it from him, then studied his face for a second longer than paperwork required. You okay? Yes. Marta did not believe him, which Reed appreciated because she did not make him correct the lie. Back at the station, Lieutenant Baines appeared in the community room near closing time and set a paper bag on Reed's desk. Coffee beans from the Marina roaster. No note. Baines stood there with his hands in his coat pockets, gray mustache hiding whatever expression might have tried to form. You did it right, he said. Reed looked at the bag. Doesn't make it lighter, Baines added. Then he left. That was all the comfort Reed could have accepted from him. Rachel sent the photograph Friday night. Tessa slept beside a large black and tan German Shepherd in a clean, straw-lined room. The mother dog's body curved protectively around her. The one-eared bear rested under Tessa's chin. The braided rope lay nearby, damp at one end, as though it had already been carried through another house and assigned meaning there. The message beneath the photo was short. She slept better after we put Bishop's towel near the crate. Thank you for keeping her safe. When Bishop is ready, they can see each other. Read the message once, then again. He set the phone face down on the table and stood with both hands against the counter. A visit might help Bishop understand. A visit might confuse Tessa. A visit might ease the ache. A visit might keep it open. He did not know which possibility was kindness and which was only hunger wearing kindness's coat. That night, Bishop slept on his old cushion for the first time since Tessa had taken it. He circled slowly before lowering himself down. His nose searched the fabric. After a while, his body settled, but his eyes stayed open longer than usual. In the morning, Reed clipped on Bishop's leash and took their regular route. The world had softened after another light snow. The sidewalks were clear where neighbors had shoveled early. Smoke rose from chimneys. The lake, visible between houses, held the pale shine of frozen glass. Bishop walked at heel without being asked, the leash loose between them. At the intersection near the old rail spur, he stopped. Left led toward the marina, the school crossing, the route they had taken for years. Right led past the pine cutover, toward the narrow service road Rachel had described, toward the side of town Reed had never needed to know before Tessa. Bishop did not pull, he did not whine, he simply stood facing right, quiet and steady, waiting in the snow. Reed looked down at him. This was not disobedience, not demand, not the restless waiting at the back door. It was a question. The leash hung loose in Reed's hand. For a long moment, man and dog stood at the fork in the winter road, with one way leading back to the life they knew, and the other toward the place where something they loved now belonged. Reed did not turn right at the intersection that morning, not immediately. Bishop stood beside him in the snow, facing the road that led past the old rail spur and the pine cutover. The leash hung loose between Reed's hand and Bishop's collar. No pull, no demand. Only the kind of waiting Reed had come to recognize as a question with weight behind it. For a long moment, Reed looked down the road. Then he took out his phone. He did not start walking first and ask forgiveness later. He did not let loneliness make the decision for both households. He typed a short message to Rachel Fenner. Would it be all right if Bishop and I came by this morning? Only if it works for Tessa. The reply came several minutes later. Yes, I'll set up the side yard. Give us 20 minutes. Reed read the words twice. Then he looked at Bishop. Not a rescue, he said quietly. A visit. Bishop did not need the distinction in words. Reed did. They walked slowly, following the road beyond the last row of houses. Harbor Glen thinned into winter fields and narrow stands of birch, their white trunks marked like old paper. The rail spur appeared through the trees, half buried in snow, two dark lines disappearing toward the north. Reed had passed near it for years without noticing where it led. Now every curve seemed to explain something. How a puppy could vanish from one life and appear in another without anyone being careless enough to blame. Rachel's place sat behind a split-rail fence and a row of pines that held snow in their branches. It was not large, but it was tended. A heated outbuilding stood behind the house, its windows fogged from the warmth inside. Clean straw bales were stacked beneath an overhang, a blue tarp covered firewood. Two gates stood between the drive and the side yard, both latched, both clipped with backup carabiners. Rachel was waiting outside in a moss-green sweater under her work jacket, hair tucked beneath a cream-knit cap. She had already cleared a path through the snow. When she saw Reed looking at the gate clips, she gave a small, embarrassed smile. I check everything twice now. That makes two of us. She did not answer with a joke. She only nodded toward the side yard. Runa and the other pups are inside behind the kitchen gate. Tessa's in the outbuilding. I thought it would be easier if she saw Bishop before everyone else got excited. Good call. Rachel opened the first gate, then the second. Bishop entered at Reed's left side, alert but not rigid. He smelled the fence post, the shoveled path, the air carrying several dogs' scents from the warm building. He did not strain toward the door. That steadiness seemed to calm Rachel more than anything Reed could have said. The outbuilding door had a screen insert on the upper half. Behind it, something small moved fast across the wooden floor. Tessa appeared with such suddenness that her paws nearly slid out from under her. She had changed in less than a week, not completely, not into a different dog, but enough for Reed to notice the care around her. Her coat looked cleaner, the tan at her chest warmer, the narrow body a little less sharp behind the ribs. The red temporary collar had been replaced by a soft collar with a small tag, though the one-eared bear lay just behind her on a folded blanket. Her uneven ears still gave her the same expression of brave confusion. The moment she saw Bishop, her whole body began to move. Rachel clipped a leash to Tessa's collar before opening the door. "Easy," she whispered, not to restrain joy, only to keep it from becoming chaos. Tessa came out like joy had already made its own decision. She rushed down the step as far as the leash allowed. Rachel followed instead of pulling back hard. Tessa reached Bishop, circled him once, then caught a mouthful of loose fur beneath his neck in the old rude greeting she had never fully abandoned. Bishop stepped back and gave a short warning sound. Tessa released him at once. She sat in the snow, ears uneven, eyes lifted to his face. Reed felt a smile break through before he could stop it. The lessons survived. Rachel let out a breath that was almost a laugh, not the manners. Bishop lowered his head and sniffed her. Tessa held still for exactly 3 seconds, which for her appeared to be a heroic act of discipline. Then her tail began moving again. Bishop turned toward the side yard, as if deciding the greeting had passed inspection. Rachel unclipped Tessa only after the second gate closed. For the first few minutes, Bishop remained on a long line. That was Reed's condition and Rachel's relief. Tessa bounded around him in wild circles, then darted toward the porch and returned with the braided rope dragging beneath her front paws. She offered one end to Bishop with no ceremony, no apology, no understanding that any heart in the yard had broken over that rope days earlier. Bishop took it. The game resumed. Not as if nothing had happened. That would have been too simple. Tessa pulled with all the power in her small body, and Bishop held just enough to let her feel resistance. When she slipped in the snow, he loosened his jaw. When she tried to twist toward his tail, she stopped herself halfway and changed direction, as though an old correction rose in her memory before Bishop needed to give it. Rachel watched with both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee she had forgotten to drink. "She's been sleeping better," she said. "Still wakes if a door shuts too hard, but she goes back down. Good. She sleeps with the bear, and sometimes your towel." Rachel looked toward the outbuilding. "She dragged one of my kitchen towels into the pen yesterday." Reed glanced at Tessa, who was now attempting to pull the rope backward while walking sideways. "Only clean towels, almost never. That tracks." Rachel smiled, then looked down into her mug. "I thought she might be confused seeing him again." "She might be," Reed said. "A little. Is this wrong?" The question was honest enough that Reed took time before answering. Across the yard, Bishop released the rope and let Tessa tumble backward into a shallow drift. She popped up with snow on her nose, shook herself, and charged him again. Bishop stood still, waiting. "I don't think connection is wrong," Reed said. "I think we can make it wrong if we use it to avoid accepting where she lives." Rachel looked at him then. He heard his own words and knew they were not only for her. Tessa belonged here. Her mother was inside. Her littermates were inside. Rachel had gates clipped twice, records in folders, food measured, and a watchful tiredness in her face that came from responsibility, not performance. Reed did not need to be the center of Tessa's safety anymore. That should have made the ache disappear. It did not. But it gave the ache somewhere honest to stand. They stayed less than an hour. Before leaving, Reed asked Rachel to keep the first visits short. Tessa was still finishing care, still adjusting, still young enough to turn every good thing into too much of a good thing. Rachel agreed before he finished explaining. The boundary did not insult her, it steadied her. At the gate, Tessa tried to follow Bishop out. Rachel called her name once. Tessa stopped. She looked at Bishop, then at Rachel, then back toward the yard. Her body trembled with indecision for a heartbeat. Then she turned and went to Rachel. Bishop watched. Reed felt that moment more sharply than he expected. Tessa had not forgotten Bishop. She had also remembered home. On the following Saturday, Reed and Bishop came again. This time, Lorna Whitsett arrived 10 minutes later with her little tin sewing box tucked under her arm and a scarf wrapped almost to her nose. She claimed she had come only because Rachel had mentioned the bear's ear was under legal threat again. Tessa greeted her with a full-body wag and immediately presented the bear by its remaining ear, which did not improve its prognosis. "I have mended less determined furniture," Lorna said, settling on the porch step. The repaired ear lasted until lunch. Marta Quinley stopped by another week later, officially to close out the emergency foster file, and unofficially to see the puppy everyone had been updating her about. She stood by the gate in her gray county jacket, clipboard against her hip, watching Tessa run beneath Bishop's chest as if he were a covered bridge. "Paperwork's clean," Marta said to Reed. "Clinic records attached. Owner verified. Foster closed. Good." She clicked her pen. "Also, for the record, this is the least annoying ending to a found dog case I've had all winter. That going in the report? No. Reports don't deserve joy." Lieutenant Baines never came to Rachel's yard, but his message arrived through Marta with dry precision. The department wanted Reed to speak at the spring community safety session about temporary animal care, lost pet reporting, and the difference between helping and taking over. Reed read the message and almost laughed. Months ago, he would have hated the idea of turning something personal into a public lesson. Now he understood the value of saying it plainly. Doing things by the book did not have to mean doing them coldly. Compassion did not become weaker because it kept records. A door could remain open without pretending every house was the same. The visits became a pattern only after everyone agreed they should. Saturday afternoons. Text first. Side yard only. Short enough that Tessa ended tired, not frantic. No bringing her back to Reed's house. Not yet, maybe not ever. No confusing the path home. No turning Bishop's grief into a claim. Boundaries, Reed was learning, did not close love down. They gave it a shape that could last. By the fourth Saturday, Bishop stopped waiting at the back door every afternoon. He still noticed 4 o'clock. He still lifted his head sometimes when wind brushed the screen, but the old ache in his routine softened. On Saturdays, when Reed reached for the leash before lunch, Bishop rose before being called. He stood beside the mudroom bench, still and ready, the way he once waited for duty. Only this duty was gentler. Tessa learned the rhythm too. Some days, when Rachel opened the side gate, Tessa came running with the braided rope already in her mouth. Some days she brought the bear, ear repaired badly and doomed again. Once she brought nothing at all, only herself, and ran straight to Bishop to press her forehead against his shoulder. That became Reed's favorite greeting. No object, no proof, just recognition. Winter held on around Harbor Glen, but the light changed by small degrees. Snow still covered the fields, yet the afternoons stretched longer. Water dripped from the edge of Rachel's barn roof when the sun struck it. The lake remained frozen, but the color beneath the ice deepened toward blue. On the last Saturday before the community safety session, Reed stood beside Rachel's fence while Bishop and Tessa settled on the wooden porch after playing. The one-eared bear lay between them. Tessa's shoulder pressed against Bishop's ribs. Bishop's chin rested near the bear, eyes half closed, scarred ear angled toward the yard. Rachel stood nearby, one hand resting on the gate. "She would have been safe with you," she said. Reed kept his eyes on the dogs. "She is safe with you. I know." Rachel's voice was quiet. "I just wanted you to know I know both things can be true. That was the mercy in it. Not choosing one truth to destroy the other." Tessa had been safe with Reed. Tessa belonged with Rachel. Bishop had loved her. Reed had let her go. The door had closed on one arrangement and opened into another. None of those truths erased the others. Lorna's blue thread held the bear's latest repair in crooked stitches. Marta's closed file sat somewhere in a county drawer. Baines's coffee bag was empty on Reed's kitchen counter. The little ceramic bowl had been washed and stored away. Bishop's old cushion was his again, though sometimes he chose the kitchen runner out of habit or memory. Reed no longer needed every object to keep the story alive. The story was there in the road Bishop recognized, the gate Rachel clipped twice, the text sent before every visit, the puppy who knew which home to return to, and the old K9 who had learned that losing a daily companion did not mean losing the bond entirely. Tessa lifted her head, picked up the bear by its battered side, and placed it between Bishop's front paws. Then she lay down again beside him. Reed felt the ache, but it no longer asked him to fix it. He had not kept the puppy. For once, that did not feel like failure. He had opened the door when she needed shelter. He had kept the records when the law required truth. He had returned her when the right home came into view, and when the loss tried to turn love into ownership, he had given the friendship a boundary instead of a chain. The snow began again, light and almost weightless. Bishop closed his eyes. Tessa slept against him. Reed stood at the fence and watched the two German shepherds breathe in the same slow rhythm, the one-eared bear between them, while the open gate behind Rachel clicked softly in the winter wind, but did not swing shut. Sometimes love enters our lives only for season, but that does not make it any less real. Reed did not get to keep Tessa, yet he gave her shelter, safety, and a way back home. And in the end, what remained was not ownership, but peace. Maybe some of us know that feeling too, caring for someone, helping them heal, and then having to let them go with grace. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about a person or animal you loved enough to release, and if you enjoy stories of loyalty, kindness, and quiet hope, please subscribe and join us again. May God give you peace for what you had to let go, and gratitude for the love that still remains.